So I've spent probably the last 6 months reviewing every single figure from the Indiana Jones Adventure series from Hasbro. And I feel like now that the range has unofficially come to an end, I think it's time to look back on the range as a whole. And especially as we've come to the end of 2023, let's take a look at what my top 5 favourite figures have been from this range. So let's get stuck into it now. Hi all, Chris here, the Geek Figure fan, and today what we're going to do is sort of look back on the Adventure series range as a whole, now that we are at the end of 2023, and as I said in the intro, kind of the unofficial end to the range, I would say. I don't see any more figures coming on the horizon, at least anytime soon, and I find it highly unlikely that we'll get any sort of HasLab for it either. I don't think there's enough of a call for it, to be honest. But that being said, there have been some fantastic figures in this range. Some of my favourites, some that I think are as good as any that I've got in my collection. And whilst I want to do a ranking of every figure that we've had, what I'm going to do today is just talk about my top 5 favourite figures from this range. And now, this is a personal list. This is personal preference. It's subjective. Whilst you'll probably find some commonality between this list and yours, you might also find that there are some figures that you hate that are in my top 5. I've no idea. I don't really know. I can't really judge the mood really with these figures in general. I see the comments on my videos, so I get an idea of which figures a lot of people prefer, but I'm not really sure whether or not my views represent the community as a whole, and I wouldn't want them to. I think that everybody's views on their top 5s are as valid as mine. So, and with that in mind, I would urge everyone to go into the comments and give me their top 5s from this range. And I'd love to see some really interesting figures that perhaps I haven't considered. But anyway, let's get stuck into my top 5 with number 5. And number 5 is actually really difficult. So before I reveal number 5, so there are 2 figures that were in contention for this one. So we've got Raiders of the Lost Ark Indie and The Last Crusade Indie. And to be honest, before I put this list together, I kind of thought about just combining all of the main movie indies into one, because it just seemed such a shame to, include all of them, because it'd just take up too much of the list. But I can't ignore a second figure from these 3. And it probably gives a little bit of a clue to another figure that's going to be slightly further up my list. But out of these 2, I think these are the 2 most similar figures in the entire range, really, other than, Temple Escape Indie. But that's a repackage of Raiders Indie with some other accessories, so I'm not really considering that one for this list. But they're effectively the same mould. But I do feel that the Last Crusade Indie edges it, and I'm going to tell you why. When you look at the 2 figures side to side, the Raiders Indie has got like a shine to it that the Last Crusade Indie doesn't. So the Last Crusade Indie is a little bit more of a matte finish or a satin finish, as opposed to this gloss look that's on the shirt and on the trousers of Raiders Indie. So I do think the Last Crusade Indie edges it for that. If you've seen my review of the Last Crusade Indie, you know I am a sucker for the tie. And I love the adjustable hat as well, the adjustable fedora. So I think that the Last Crusade Indie, whilst being an almost identical mould to Raiders, edges it for me. And I know that you could say with the accessories, Raiders Indie probably edges it a little bit with the extra hands and the golden idol. But for me, the Last Crusade Indie with the tie and with the adjustable hat just makes it into my top 5 ahead of Raiders of the Lost Ark Indie. So my number 5, Last Crusade Indie. On to my number 4, which is Map Room Indie. Now this figure, I don't know about anybody else, really took me by surprise with kind of how much I love this figure. So it was a figure that I knew was coming, and I'd known from a number of different countries that they were having issues getting hold of one of these. And I think I just went into my local action figure retailer, and there was one there on the shelf, so I picked it up. And besides, I knew that I would have to review it on the channel at some point, but there was just no urgency to it. It would probably be number 1 for figures that shocked me how much I loved them. This Map Room Indie is fantastic from top to bottom. I mean, the head sculpt looks great. I think it's the same head sculpt as the Raiders Indie, with obviously different head accessories that go with it. But that kind of turban looks fantastic on him, as does the long gown, which I think works on Map Room Indie much better than it does on Salah. I think the accessories for Map Room Indy are also excellent. That Staff of Ra with that headpiece looks phenomenal. And whilst, yes, there's some duplication with the rope and the shovel, you get the little notebook there as well. But the whole package and just how much it shocked me that I loved this figure really shoots it into the top 5 for me. I think it looks incredible on the shelf. It's such a great silhouette, and it really stands out next to all my other indie figures. So yeah, a little bit surprising for me, but yeah, Map Room Indie makes it to number 4. Now my number 3 might not surprise a lot of you, but this Grail Knight, wow, I just love it. I cannot get over how good this Grail Knight looks. And I remember when the Pipeline reveals first came out, I was so pleased that they were doing a Grail Knight figure, because it just felt like something that you knew was going to be different to everything else that's in the range. There is no way this Grail Knight is going to be a man in a suit. Oh, I mean, technically he is. He's a man in a suit of armor. But, we'd had so many men in suits with, bow ties on. So the Grail Knight was kind of a breath of fresh air. The quality of the chain, the look of the chainmail, the face sculpt, the cloak, the accessories, the sword and separate scabbard, everything about this figure is fantastic. The fact that you get the True Grail as an accessory as well. It's one of the best head sculpts in the entire range, and I just think that this figure ticks every box. The colouring is so good. The fact that there's probably 5 distinct fabrics or materials that are being depicted by the plastic on this 6-inch figure, and every single one of them looks effective, whether it's chainmail or it's leather or it's velvet, or it's skin and hair, that it all just works for this figure. And it was tough to put it at only 3, because I think 3 and 2 were almost interchangeable. But my decision is final, and Grail Knight sits at 3. At number 2, we're really getting to the tough ones now. So at number 2, I have put Temple of Doom Indy, because this is for me the iconic indie look. I think Temple might be the one that I watched the most as a kid, maybe because it was so scary and it was something different. But that ending scene on the bridge is iconic. Whenever I think of an indie scene, it's, there's the Mount Rushmore of indie quality action scenes, and that bridge escape is right up there. Combine that with the minecart escape that goes before it, but that vision of Indy with his shirt ripped and the big machete sword above his head as he's trying to cut the rope of the bridge, it's depicted perfectly in this figure. Even down to the whip marks on his shirt and the arm of the shirt being ripped off, the rips on the trouser legs, just the wear, the sweat that you can see on the shirt. Everything about this figure is incredible. I really struggle to fault this figure. And I mean, the accessories were good. They weren't perfect, but the figure itself, wow, it by far. And I know if anyone was following the bracket that we did, the knockout competition for the Indiana Jones Adventure Series, this figure won the whole thing. And I'm not surprised. It's a quality figure. So yeah, Temple Indy at number 2. And at number 1, it might surprise some, it might not surprise anyone, but this was the figure that I was most excited for out of every single figure, because it's probably my favourite Indiana Jones scene of all time, and that is Club ObiWan Indy. This figure is perfect. The look of the suit, the carnation on the chest, the waistcoat, the shiny black shoes, the head sculpt. I think it was the first Indy that we'd seen in this range without a hat on. Oh, it really doesn't disappoint. There's nothing about this figure that isn't incredible. And even it goes to the accessories too. There is such a wide variety of quality accessories in this figure. You've got the little vial of antidote. You've got the crystal. You've got the jar with Nahachi's remains in it. You've got like a flaming kebab skewer. You've got a big sword. It's just awesome. Such a posable figure that works in so many different ways, and probably a really kit bashable figure as well. But from my perspective, when I was thinking about this list, this was the first name on it. This was my number 1. I didn't even really have to think about it. It's just indie in that, James Bond, weird, musical, cool, fun entrance scene that I could watch again and again just on its own without having to even watch the rest of the movie. And I think when you look back at movies that were let down by their figures, the fact that Temple of Doom got no villains whatsoever, when we could have had, Lao Che, if Hasbro and Disney were concerned about, the complications of certain villains from Pankot, Lao Che was an easy win. It's such an iconic scene, and it had iconic characters that you don't see again that I think resonate throughout the entire franchise, to be honest. So yeah, anyway, I'm digressing, but Club ObiWan Indie was an easy number one for me. So I'd love you to get down in the comments and let me know what your top 5 would be. And please give me grief for my terrible choices for my top 5, but I love them. I'm sticking with them. If you've liked this video, please consider giving it a like. And I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel as well, because we will still be doing some more Adventure Series videos, but we're also going to be looking at a lot more Ninja Turtles that are coming up at the moment. We're going to dip our toe into some Marvel figures as well. I've obviously subscribed to the HasLab 2 in a Box. That review will be coming once that is shipped. So that'll be in 2024. So there's a lot of exciting things coming for the channel. So please consider subscribing. It'd really help me out. And in doing so, you'll hopefully be notified when I drop my ranking list for every figure in this range. But regardless, if you're interested in more Indiana Jones Adventure Series videos, why not check out this video next? Thanks ever so much for joining me today. I hope you all take care. Bye-bye now.